Sijbrandij, co-founder and CEO at Gitlab, and this is an AMA, Ask Me Anything. And Rebecca, thank you for putting in the first question. Do you want to verbalize it?
Yes. Sid, could you please describe your past experiences with executive coaching? What impact has any coaching you've had on GitLab's values? And what's the most important personal insight you've gained from any coaching you've had?
Thank you. Yeah, I've had multiple coaches. It's been very helpful. It's different things, mostly how to approach situations. For example, one time we were going to have a big miss on the quarter. We were going to be 20% below. And I was like, that's really bad, but okay, what's the next step? And John Hamm, my coach at the time, said, okay, it's really important that you make sure you understand exactly why you're missing, like what assumptions were wrong. And now that you know that, what are you changing in the organization to address that? And that sounds super mundane, maybe, but it is something I wouldn't have figured out myself at that time. So I think that's a great thing about the coach. It's people who've seen the movie before who can help you zoom out, get a better overview, and even like help you. And sometimes they maybe go through the data themselves with you, or they have experience, or they know someone you can talk to who has experience. So that's super helpful. And I love your angle to the values. I wonder where it's coming from, but for sure, there was a big contribution to the values. We had, so John Hamm coached me from, I think, 2016 to 2018. And we had 13 values at a certain point, and no one knew more than 3 of them. So it wasn't good. So he saw that. He's like, oh, that's not good. We gotta tighten that up. So we wrote out all the values, plus we added some values that we thought might be good. And then we try to cluster them, like, hey, which ones belong together? And then we try to find kind of the statements that would represent them. And then we check them against the 5 dysfunctions you can have in a company, making sure we addressed all of those. And then I had an acronym, and I think I mentioned it to Karen, and Karen says like, oh, you can also spell credit with the same letters. And I'm like, that's a good one. I overlooked that one. So yeah, that was super helpful. And yeah, personal insight. Yeah, you learn a ton. Like CEO, co-founder of a startup is one of the few roles where like no one questions that you're doing the biggest job in your life without any experience for it. But that means you have to learn a lot. And that means that you want coaching. And for example, I report to the board. They're my boss in a sense, but it's not quite like a normal boss where you where there's one person and the coaching kind of comes with the package. And even in GitLab, we offer some people coaching, even though they have a manager. Coach just makes it easier to be vulnerable, and it's a different set of eyes. I found it really helpful, and I've continued. And today, Dan Levin is my coach. So that's been really great. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Sri.
Sri is not able to make the call, so I'll go ahead and read it. What are your Q2 highlights? What are you most excited about in Q3? And any comments about external situations and their impact on Q3?
Yeah. Q2 highlights, I think the really big deal, and we're still a private company, so I can just say it. We had a customer sign with us for $21 million in licenses. And that was a really great thing because it shows how valuable the product is. So I think that was another proof point for us. And I think that's a really exciting thing that people see the value in GitLab, the product. all in all, the quarter is going really, really well. I think we've very rapidly recovered from kind of the drop in pipeline we've seen as soon as COVID started, and company budgets are going back up. Most excited in Q3, a couple of things. It's a quarter, so there's going to be 3 GitLab releases, which is amazing. I'm excited about a lot of stuff that's in the OKRs. We're going to do a ton of different things. I'm excited about rallying around GitLab capabilities. If you Google GitLab capabilities on our Drive or watch on our pricing page, we're trying to do a better job of communicating the value of the features you purchase by kind of grouping them. Before, we just listed features, but that wasn't super effective because we have over 100 features in GitLab, so you can never list them all. I think by bundling them, it's easier to communicate that. So I'm excited about rolling that out and making sure everyone is trained in that, etc. So a ton more. If you kind of want to dive in, GitLab OKRs Q3, there's already a bunch on the page. But I hope just for both the company, but mostly for society, that the second wave of COVID will be under control soon. Jörn.
Hey Sid, so I was wondering what the, speaking of values and valuable products, what was the most valuable thing you learned or picked up during your time growing GitLab from 0 to more than 1,300 people?
Cool. Yeah, many things. I think even though I was set on writing a lot of things down, I think I still underestimated the impact that would have. I think that being able to kind of articulate how all the parts of the company work and how they work together has been amazingly helpful. And I think otherwise it would have been very hard to triple in headcount last year. I think that we learned to trust ourselves. We knew that all remote worked and no one believed us. And it was just because they didn't try it. Now that people have tried, everyone is like, yeah, of course it works. And I think we'll see other things that are just going to make sense in the future. Maybe they won't be implemented as fast, but I think our outbound recruiting model is already showing a lot of promise. I think us taking a clear stance that we pay market rates for the area that you live in, and we weren't wishy-washy about that. I think that's being vindicated. So I love that sometimes we have a strong stance and we're wrong and we change, but I think we've learned to trust ourselves when we think something, and we can be public about it. And you'll see us being even more outspoken in the future.
Thanks. So my next question is, are you easily nerd sniped? And if so, which topic triggers your inner nerd the most?
I'm very easily nerd sniped, and I know the XKCD comic. Luckily, I never got nerd sniped on the crosswalk. Yesterday was a good example of something where someone made a totally reasonable decision, but I still took over our company Twitter account and tweeted out our release. Our Twitter account is a verified account, and it was blocked by Twitter because they were hacked or socially engineered. And our account was only restored very late in the day yesterday. And we released GitLab on the 22nd, like usual. So the blog post was up, the code repositories were out. But for me, and that's a bit, it's in the past, but for me, the tweet is the release. At one point, me and Dimitri were on the stage on Railsbury. That's the first time I met Dimitri in Krakow. That's a whole story how we first met. But and there were like the birds of a feather sessions, or the really short ones, and we went up on stage and we say, hey, it's the 22nd, so we're going to release GitLab, and I to turn my Wi-Fi on and off to get a connection, but we sent that tweet. So kind of that tweet signifies for me that GitLab is released even more than maybe publishing the blog post. And I couldn't stand that we break our chain of over 100 releases on the 22nd. So I sent out the tweet yesterday. It was retweeted today. It was a bad time for sending a tweet because most of the world was asleep, but so be it. It got out. I hope that's a story you hoped for. Michael.
I said, yeah, that's a wonderful story, because I was actually wanting to ask you about the 100 consecutive releases, and which month was the first GitLab release and how did it go back then?
Yeah, well, I wasn't around back then. I only became involved with GitLab a year into the product. So I asked Dimitri, like, where's this 22nd thing coming from? And he was just like, well, I released it on a certain day. And then I was gearing up for the next release, and it was kind of getting pretty close. I released it again on the 22nd, and then he kind of kept that going. So, but if you want to know more about that, either you have to ask Dimitri, or Douwe just did an interview with Dimitri about the early days of GitLab, but it was recorded, not live streamed. So I'm not sure it's up yet. But
I'll interrupt right away since I'm here anyway. I just put it up on YouTube, GitLab Unfiltered, so you can check it out there. I'll drop a link in the Zoom channel as well, and I'm about to publish it on the Meltano blog as well, if you'd like to check that out. But yes, I had a conversation with DZ about the early open source days of GitLab, and he knows much more about it than Sid, as Sid explained.
Yeah, I wasn't there, so thank you, Douwe. Thanks for adding that. Mario, you have question number 6.
Yes, hello, Sid. I was wondering if you could please elaborate a little bit on how the credit values got created. I think you answered a little bit of that in the first question, but perhaps how did they came to exist as they are today?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we talked a bit about the grouping of the values, but really what we tried to do at that point was kind of aggregate the values as we've mostly already written them down over time, kind of between 2015 and 2016. And those values came from kind of the spirit of the early days of GitLab. And iteration came about because we were in Y Combinator and all the other companies were being much more successful. And we just said, okay, we're going to do whatever we planned for the next 3 months, and we're just going to do it in the next 2 weeks. And you can only do that if you greatly reduce scope. And we reduced scope, shipped 20% of the functionality, but like covering like 80% of the upside, and it worked beautifully. And we're like, wow, we uncovered something that we didn't expect, and we have to keep that going. So that's where iteration came from. Transparency came from us starting a company around an open source project. We were really afraid that we'd alienate the wider community around GitLab. So I thought, like, let's be as transparent as we can, because that will allow them to relate to us better. And there's stories for all of our values. But in the interest of time and the next couple of questions, I'll move on if that's okay with you.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you. Jessica.
Hey, Sid, how are you? I'm just curious what you think is the one business challenge, especially how kind of COVID has changed the economic environment now, is the, excuse me, if we solve that, what would make the biggest impact to our customers and even potentially GitLab?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing GitLab can contribute is reduce the cycle time, kind of make it faster. And lots of great things happen when you make something faster. Famously, Goldman Sachs was able to ship their most important application instead of 2 weeks to get it out the door. It was 2 minutes. When you do that, you have such a feeling of progress. It becomes more fun to do something. Sometimes I want to improve something, and I know it's going to take a very long time, and I don't even start doing it. And when you make it small, it becomes more fun because you know you're going to get rewarded by seeing the result. You know that the chances of it getting canceled or lost along the way are smaller. It's like living really close to someone instead of being a couple of hours drives away. You're just going to see that person more often because it's more convenient. And I think that's the value that we can bring to companies, where you don't have to hop through 10 different applications to get something done. And that immediacy, that just gives more joy, it gives more feedback, and I think that's what we bring. David.
Hey, Sid. With Burning Man canceled this year, and I know you bragged a little bit about the PTO you took off last year. What do you have planned for this summer for vacation?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm very sad it's canceled for everyone else, but we weren't planning to go. So we've gone a couple of years now, and I think there's diminishing returns, although it's super fun. Over the last 6 weeks, I took 2 weeks of PTO, and both times we went up north to Napa and Sonoma wine country. It's beautiful weather there, unlike San Francisco, where it's 65 degrees and it's not bad, but it's a bit chilly for Californians. We went wine tasting. The wineries still have outside spots open, so that was great. We also, this weekend, for example, we're going back up there, and I'm looking forward on trying my new off-road skates. They're from Powerslide, and they have it's not a great name, but I'm going to say it. They are called Grave Diggers, and it means that they have 200 millimeter wheels, air tires, and you can go off-road with them, like not on tarmac, but just out on walking trails. So I'm probably going to injure myself slightly trying that out this weekend. So looking forward to that. They're amazing things, and I'm going to try to Nordic walk on these things. And then not coming week, but the week after, I also have a week off, and we'll go to Santa Cruz, so we'll go south. Good friends of us have also rented a house there. So moving forward to that, I encourage everyone to take some time off. I don't think we're doing a good job as a company because I'm super busy in these weeks, and it's summertime. So something is wrong, and I blame everyone else not taking as much time off as I am. Next one is Mike.
Cool. Hey, Sid. So as most players in DevOps are realizing that consolidated platforms are going to win, I'm curious what your thoughts are on how soon we might see big cloud providers go all in on platforms that work best within their service, or do you anticipate that they might lean more towards neutrality?
Yeah, thanks for that. For everyone else's context, we're now seeing that many of the players within the DevOps space realize that all-in-one platforms, complete DevOps platforms delivered as a single application, that is the future. And what's happening is that many players are trying to build that out of different solutions because they don't have time to build it from the ground up. I think that's not going to be as good of a user experience. I think the only ones who will be able to build something is Microsoft Azure GitHub. GitHub is a pretty good offering already. They have amazing amount of users, and they're doing a good job of adding functionality. Now, GitLab has a wider breadth, more depth, more functionality, and we're improving at a faster rate. So we look forward to that competition. So Azure has their strategy. They're betting on the combination of GitHub and Azure DevOps. I think the other clouds have tried. Google had code repositories, which they deprecated. Azure has CodeStar, which I don't think we see in the marketplace, and I don't think it's improving at the rate that GitLab is improving. So I think it turns out that a complete DevOps platform is a ton of work. Like a couple of years ago when we started it, everyone was like, this doesn't make sense. You cannot build it. I think we're proving that we can build it. I think we're proving that we can build it through amazing efficiency. I'm very proud of the MR rate of our engineering group. We can build it because we're open source. We have the wider community contributing 300 improvements in GitLab in a month, in the second to last release, which is amazing. So we can do it. Microsoft will be able to do it. They're $1 trillion company and they're super focused on dev tools, and they bought the biggest Git host. So they will have some years of integration struggles between Azure DevOps and GitHub, but they'll be able to make it work. I don't think that there will be other players who will be able to make it work. It's just very, very costly. And if you don't, it's late in the cycle. And if you don't get to a certain height, it's just inferior. People want best-in-class solutions. So like our version control, our CI needs to be best in class. People will not settle. And it's hard to become best in class over 7 or 10 categories. So that's how I think it will play out. And we should make sure that we support all the cloud providers. We partner with all of them, including Azure. And I think it will be, everyone will see the benefit of a DevOps platform that is not owned by or has allegiance to a certain cloud provider. Cool. Rose, thanks for asking the last question.
Yes, so this is Rose. I wanted to know, now I see a lot of news on more companies and corporates going remote, which I think is amazing. But I wonder what you think is the biggest advantage of GitLab being remote already prior COVID-19?
Yeah, I think our advantage is that we've learned that it's not enough to just work remote. You also have to organize the informal communication. I think we have a head start there. And a lot of companies I talk with, people are like, yeah, we're effective. We're getting work done. We're getting even more work done, but I'm miserable. And I think COVID is affecting us all. I'm also a bit miserable because of COVID. And I assume many of you are also not feeling as great as you normally do. But I think in those companies, in addition to living in a pandemic, there's also that there's no room for informal communication. Their CEOs don't do an AMA. There's no coffee chats. There's no group conversations. There's no talent shows. There's no this, there's no that. So I think that's a big advantage at GitLab. And I hope that everyone is using that because we can't just work the whole day and have functional communication. Sometimes you just want to hang out with people, get to know them on a personal level. So I think that's our big advantage. At the same time, I think that the competition for remote workers is going to intensify, which is going to be a great thing for the world. We've been able to hire people at much lower rates at other locations because the market rate was lower there. And now that companies like Shopify and Stripe are hiring remotely, you'll see those market rates go up. We'll have to raise our market rates in those in all across the world. And it's going to be a great thing. I think it's beautiful if in thousands, in more than 100 countries, if you know how to code or how to do UX well, or any of these things that are easily transferable skills, you get to earn a decent income. So that gap is going to close. And I look forward, I don't think it will ever come where it's exactly the same, but I look forward to kind of decreasing the gap between San Francisco and some other locations in the world. I think that will be a great thing. And I hope that we will be on the forefront of adjusting our rates to that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you too. Thanks, everyone.